Good morning. It is June 9th. And today I wanted to talk to you about a number of subjects. I'm going to try to make this video brief, but it's going to be nearly impossible because when I look around, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. Some of which I haven't spoken to you about ever. Which is sort of amazing since I have over 200 videos out there, all of which I implore you to watch because they're not always easy to make, and I think there's some pretty good pointers in a lot of them. And I try not to make too many videos. I try to make videos that are meaningful and have a purpose. And so if you go back and look at a lot of my videos, they're just as valid and just as useful today as they were when I made them years ago. So with that, let me introduce a couple of the subjects today that we're going to be speaking about. One of them is fertilizing, because it's time to fertilize my fig trees here in this location in 7B. And the reason why it's time, and we're going to talk a little bit about grafting and some other things and some nematodes and some nematode resistant rootstocks that I'm going to recommend for what it's worth. And trust me, it's worth a lot, because I've been dealing with this property for over 30 years, 34 years. And I can tell you that I've grown probably 100 varieties here, many of which succumb to nematodes and the cold. And they just weren't adapted or adaptable enough for this climate. And so over the years, I've learned a lot about which varieties are nematode resistant and which ones are not, like this little Ronde Bordeaux, which has been here this is his 4th year here. And I've been taking, by the way, it looked a little better than this 2 weeks ago. You have to forgive the traffic. It's summer here and quite lively and busy. But 2.5 weeks ago, I started to graft. And so I've been taking a lot of wood from this tree. So it looked a little better, but not much better. I've been taking wood from it. And it's been here for like 4 years, and it refuses to grow well because it's infected very badly with nematodes. Now, it has produced fruit in the past. There's a little figlet, a little baby figlet right there. And I've eaten some good Ronde Bordeaux off of this, but it eventually gave way to the assault on its root system by the root knot nematodes. And so I'm just using it now for grafting for scion. So that's what I've been up to. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about fertilizing. This is what I'm using this time because it's the only thing I have on hand. It's 3-month Miracle Grow. And I use it very, very sparingly. I'm not a big, heavy proponent of fertilizing figs heavily. And I generally only do it once a year. And there's reasons for that. Because I don't want my fig trees to grow too vigorously. I want them to produce fruit. Well, a friend just visited me, so I took a pause. I was talking about fertilizing, and I'm a huge proponent. I think I need some coffee right now, honestly. I am a big fan of organic fertilizers, but because all I have right now on hand is this, which I usually use for like bushes and non-edibles around my house on another property. This one too sometimes for the crepe myrtle and so on. But I'm going to use this time. I'm going to shake it around my fig trees. And the reason why I'm doing it now is because now's the time. The fruit has already set, as you can see. It's well set. So there's no danger of over-fertilizing and preventing a larger crop of figs. If you fertilize earlier than the fruit sets, I have found that, personally, that it can really hinder the harvest and you won't have as many figs. And it encourages too much growth too early in the season. And the last thing I want is a lot of growth, unless it's fruit production. I want really thick, heavy branches that are suitable for fruit production. I don't like flimsy branches. You've heard me say that over and over again. I just don't want that. And too much fertilizer will encourage flimsy branches that aren't good fruit producers. So I stick with the process of keeping my fertilizer at a minimum, and only in the early part of the season after the fruit set. So that's for what it's worth, that's my method. So if you like my results, maybe you can also utilize that practice. It works for me. Here, I'm just going to spread a little bit of fertilizer, as I said, rather sparsely around my plants. And that'll be it. I'm done. I'm done with that. I won't fertilize anymore because I want my trees to produce fruit, and I don't want them to continue to grow in the fall because the green wood, okay, is more susceptible to winter kill. And I've always got to be conscious of the fact that I live in terrible zones for growing figs. I just do. Gosh, you don't know how many times I've thought over the years, I wish I lived somewhere like in California or someplace where I could have more varieties that were going to flourish, and I didn't have to worry about fertilizing through the summer because the green wood would freeze or be more susceptible to winter kill. All of these considerations I have to consider very carefully if I want to have a successful fig orchard. And I have struggled for 34 years on this property to have a successful fig orchard, and it has not been all easy, I have to tell you. And I've had many failures, in terms of fig varieties, but I've had many rewards too, and I've enjoyed growing figs on this property tremendously. I love figs, love them, and I'm going to continue to grow them until my dying day, or as long as I can physically keep up with the hobby. Here I've just got, I was not prepared for this, and so I don't have my good grafting tools. So I'm just grafting. I've got a bunch of things in here. This is the grafting knife I'm using right now, and it's working really well because it has a thin blade and I can really control the cuts. Okay, and then of course I've got my rubber bands and I've got my grafting tape and things like that. I think I'll make a video next time about the different techniques I use, and I want to talk about that too, about grafting. I'm getting ahead of myself, but for what it's worth, I am not a strong advocate of grafting figs in my zones. Now let me qualify with specificity before somebody hears that and goes, "What? Are you kidding me? What? Lou Monty said what?" Wait, look, grafting is a fantastic and useful tool in certain zones. There's no question about that. I wish I lived in one of those zones. I don't. And the reason why I don't use a lot of grafting is because when you have dieback, all of that work that you devoted to grafting your figs, it goes to waste. Like for instance, I haven't shown you a video yet, and I'm going to. Probably the next day or two, I'm going to make a video of the extensive winter kill at my New Jersey property. And you're going to see what happens when you when you rely on growing figs in a zone that really is inappropriate as far as in-ground. Of course, containers are fine. But in-ground, which is my favorite way to produce succulent, delicious, exquisitely spectacular tasting figs, there's going to be a price to pay occasionally when you have in-ground fig trees in certain zones. And this year I paid a huge price, as you will see. And so if I relied on grafting to do a lot of the things that I would love to do, okay? All that work, all that previous work for the last few years that I've gotten away with being able to survive the winters because they were relatively mild for 3 years in a row, and then all of a sudden this last winter, the fourth winter, it's basically killed my entire orchard. I'm going to show you. It's sad, but it's not all that dismal. I'm going to talk to you about it. Debbie's been after me to trim them down and cut them down and get them under control, and so I'll use this experience, this negative experience, I'll try to turn it into something positive. Okay, and we'll talk about that in the next video. But as far as grafting, if I had done a lot of extensive grafting in New Jersey, it would have all been for nothing. It would have been a total waste. And so it's not a good thing. I don't practice grafting much. Okay, especially in 7A. Now in 7B, I get away with more. I've only had winter kill here, one severe winter kill, 1 year that I can recall. I've talked about that in previous videos once or twice. And I talked in my last video about what I'm doing here as far as grafting this tree, which is Iracondens XL. And I'm putting Ronde Bordeaux because Ronde Bordeaux is extremely susceptible to nematodes. And I want Ronde Bordeaux here. I want it here. I love Ronde Bordeaux. So now I've been doing a lot of grafting. I did some more yesterday. I haven't had much time to do the grafting because I've been working on my deck and doing other maintenance projects. And believe me, all my time has been swept away by these projects, especially this time of year. I can't wait to get it done so I can get back to my regular normal life. But I did some pretty good grafts. I'm not the best grafter. I take my time and I try to do it with as much precision as I possibly can. I take my time, and I'll continue, and I'm hopeful that some of these will succeed. And I think they will. My experience in the past has been pretty good with grafting. I have a pretty good record on it. So, already some of that's coming loose. But I did the best that I could do. And it of course, is past the perfect time to do grafting, which is early in the season. And it's good to use scion that is dormant, which I did not do. So, can you graft greenwood? Yes, you certainly can do it. Okay, and you just have to do the best that you can do, and realize that you're probably going to have only half the success as what you would have if you did it earlier in the season when the graft wood was dormant still. But it's okay. I've done it many times, and I don't mind. You know, I just didn't have an opportunity to do it then, and I do now. So I'm going to do it, and I'm going to continue. Like I'm going to cut this. See this? I'm going to do another one today when I'm done this video. I'm going to graft that. I'm going to do as many as I can, and I'm going to continue as they grow. I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to get Ronde Bordeaux established on this tree. And we talked about that in the last video if you want to know more about that. So, again, let's go back to the fruit being set. You can see that there's fruit everywhere on this tree. You see it? There's plenty of fruit on this tree, and it's time to fertilize, therefore. Here I've got a little fig garden started already, and they've been in the ground for about a week, I guess, or more than that, maybe 10 days. And I dug out the soil here. Figs sometimes are so much work. And I put it in a different location where I needed some dirt buildup. And I put some topsoil in there, trying to get rid of the nematodes. But this is Peter's honey, which is extremely resilient, more so than even Cadota, a close relative. And there is a difference. And when these start to grow, and they're doing pretty good, I'm going to use them as rootstock for Ronde Bordeaux and a couple other varieties that I'm going to try to get established here, including Italian 258. And so that's one of the projects I'm working on right now. It's going to take time to have results, because I have found, and I read some literature about Peter's honey being bulletproof for nematodes. I don't agree with that. I don't really think that any common fig is bulletproof for nematodes. But I can tell you one thing, and here we go, for what it's worth. Head on the chopping block. I will tell you that in my experience and in my opinion, there is no better variety for nematode resistance to use as a rootstock than, especially if you live in the cold zones, than Peter's honey. And it's better than Cadota. I've grown Cadota, and it was more susceptible to nematodes. It's just, I've done it 3 times. And so I can tell you that my Peter's honey it could be the variant that I have. I have an unusual variant, but I can tell you that Cadota is good for nematode resistance, but not as good as Peter's honey. And the next one I would say, and let me put you on pause for a second. Well, let me clarify something. Let me make very perfectly clear what I just said. There are strains of rootstocks available commercially, which if you have a very bad nematode problem, you had sandy soil or you're in a warm southern climate, even this climate's very bad for nematodes. And when they did this property, when they prepared this property, they put a lot of sand. I don't know why. It was just the worst kind of dirt, and the kind that's conducive to nematodes, root knot nematodes. But if you live in Florida or any place like that in the South, Florida's terrible for nematodes. There are commercially available rootstocks that are better probably than Peter's honey, but they will not take the cold. They're no good not even in 7B here, certainly not 7A back home. And so I won't use those, but they are commercially available if you happen to live in a warm zone and you have a nematode problem. That's the direction that you should probably want to go in. And as far as the LSU varieties, like LSU Gold and LSU Purple, I can tell you that they're not. I can tell you from personal experience, they are not as nematode resistant as Peter's honey. Period. They are not. And so I am using the Peter's honey here from my own tree, which has been here for 30 plus years. Let's go over. This is Smith, and it's doing very well except for the deer eating at it. It's been there a couple of years, and it's winter hardy in this zone. But my Peter's honey, which is very, 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 very productive, and I feature it many times for many reasons, is very, very resistant to nematodes. It's been here forever. I mean, it's just, look where I used to cut it back. In there's a 1 foot diameter. Look in there. It's a 1 foot diameter. It used to be 1 foot around the diameter. Imagine how big it was. When I cut it away, Debbie was always after me to cut it. It was banging up against the building. And so I cut this tree so many times. And I made a series a few years ago about radical pruning, where I cut it all down to 3.5 feet, 4 feet. And it's all grown back. Look at it. Let's scale it right now. It's huge. And I cut it back all the time. It's very nematode resistant. You know, it gets nematodes, but the nematodes just can't hold it down. Not like this Ronde Bordeaux and some other varieties. And I'm very familiar with the nematodes, and I'm very familiar with what varieties are resistant to the nematodes. So out there, anybody listening, if you want good rootstock, and if your problem's not that bad, especially if you live in a colder zone, then use Peter's honey for a rootstock. It's excellent. Absolutely excellent. Okay? Here's an anomaly I want to talk to you about very quickly, too. See, this is what I'm saying. How do I make a short video? I don't know. Because there's so much to talk about. I could just go on and on. I've mentioned this before. This is Hardy Chicago. And I have had Hardy Chicagos. I've grown Hardy Chicago right there several times. And they just succumb completely to nematodes. But this Hardy Chicago has been here for 30 years. And it just never stops growing. And it produces fruit galore. Such an abundance of fruit. It's an incredible representation of the Mount Etna type figs. It just is. I don't like the taste of this fig, though. It's different than many of my typical Mount Etnas. Some of this, by the way, if you're looking at leaf structure, some of the more astute people out there with a little bit more experience maybe will notice that some of these leaves are different. And that's because there's a little bit of mission growing in here. I talked about that before. It's a long story. I had a mission tree that was 25 feet high here once. 25 feet high. And that's not an exaggeration. But there's still a remnant of it growing down here from long, long ago. There's so much. This has been here so long. This tree has been cut back so many times. But this Hardy Chicago part, which is an original Hardy Chicago, it is, although not the tastiest fig of my Mount Etna types, for some reason, it is resistant to nematodes. It has shown incredible resistance to nematodes. How do you figure that out? I don't know. I can't give you an answer if you ask me that question. Because I have had failures. And believe me, I know what nematodes are, and I dig down in the roots and I can tell. And here we go, more time. Now I can talk to you about something else. Let me walk over here. I've got a sad announcement. Are you ready? Okay, here we are. Here's a sad announcement. I am about to lose an old friend. This particular Celeste tree and I are very old companions. I found this Celeste tree when I first moved on this property 34 years ago. And I selected it because it was an excellent representation of the Celeste family of figs, a slight variant. Although the figs weren't very big, they were very deep red inside and very, very flavorful. It was an abundant producer. And I've grown it here for so many years. This particular one, though, was more susceptible, I think, to nematodes. And I knew that it had an infestation because I poked around in the roots several times. And I knew that it wasn't after I chopped it so many times, I knew it started to grow a little more slowly. And I understand nematodes. Trust me, I do. And this year, it looked like it was going to fruit again. I knew it was sick. But it's finally capitulating to the onslaught, the terrible, terrible, aggressive onslaught of the root knot nematode. You can see it. Look at it. It's sick. And the fruit that it was producing, even in the last video that I made for you, now it's just withering away. It's not going to grow. Look, it's over. There's nothing I can do for this tree now, because I don't like using harsh chemicals, and I'm not going to use them. It's over. It's an old friend, and thank you very much to this tree for all the years of service to me and the companionship. Now you'll notice that this part of the tree is still vibrant. You see the fruit? It was like in the last video a few days ago, or a week ago or so. It's got plenty of fruit, this part of the tree. And why? Because over the years, growing this tree in different places as it grew, and I cut it back, it used to be a massive tree. Look at that trunk there, yeah. It used to be a very big tree, very big. And full of fruit, so much fruit. But as it spread across the ground, some of the roots on this side of this particular trunk, this one, okay, some of the roots are still okay, and they haven't been affected by the nematodes enough to kill this. This part of the tree is being sustained by healthy enough roots to do that. Whereas on this side, it's completely succumbed to the onslaught of nematodes. So I'm going to have to cut this out. Now, I've talked to Debbie about this yesterday, and she wants me to leave this part. So after it fruits, at least, I'll get a few more figs. I'm certainly in favor of that. But I'm going to cut down this other part. It's going to be sad. And I think I'm going to remove the entire tree after this year, because there's nothing that I can... Believe me, there's no cure to nematodes. There just is no cure. Eventually they win. They win, you lose. Now, the second most resistant tree that I've ever grown with regard to root knot nematode is Desert King. Okay? And we talked about Desert King in the last video. And there it is, and about losing the briba, and I've lost about, I don't know, maybe 5/6, a large portion, 3/4 for sure of my briba. Desert King has a very winter hardy briba compared to many other varieties in my experience. And so some have survived, whereas with my other trees, none have survived because of the cold, and I spoke about that in my last video. Here we have some briba, and on another subject, and here we go, I could just make a video over every single one, all these subjects that I'm seeing here. But I wanted to very quickly say, let me go up here and I'll show you a better example of what I'm about to say. Okay. As you see, I'm coming along day by day and getting the deck finished and all my work on this property. Whew. It's been 2.5 weeks of solid, grueling work. But if you look at this tree, okay, which has been here for, again, over 30 years, very resistant to nematodes. I've dug down into the roots. They are infected, mildly infected, but it's very resistant to nematodes. Not quite as good as Peter's honey, but darn near. But what I wanted to point out here is, remember my videos I've made about human selection versus natural selection, and I talked about all the different various dog breeds that all of them came about because of human intervention and because of human selection, breeding one dog with another with certain traits. Well, this goes on all the time, even in agriculture. We've talked about this subject. And so it's very important, and I have stressed in the past, when you're trying to propagate fig trees, try to get the very best cuttings you possibly can from the best examples of fig trees you possibly can find. And when you're doing it yourself from your own stock, make sure you pick the very, very best of the best. And so what do I mean by that? Here's a case point. Some of these branches have a few briba, 1 or 2, but not many. And a lot of them don't have any, because they all, the briba are very tiny, for those of you that don't know. In the fall, they're just little tiny dimples or pimples. And they have to winter all winter long in order to grow into these large figs that get ripe around the 4th of July. All right? Well, those dimples or pimples are susceptible to winter cold. And that's what my last video was about. And certain varieties are more resistant in that regard. Their briba will survive colder temperatures. Desert King is the best for that. No question, in my experience, for what it's worth, okay? I haven't grown anything that has a better briba crop, for one thing, and it tastes great, it's a huge crop, and they are resistant to the cold. So if you live in 7B or 7A like I do, okay, that's an important factor to take into consideration. If you're in California or some other place in a warmer zone, that's okay. Well, then you have more latitude for experimentation or so on and so forth. But Desert King also is, along with Feliciano Bianco, a very winter hardy too. So that's the tree itself is very winter hardy. And you got to have both. But getting back to human selection, when you look in this tree, there's a few branches that have more briba than the others. Look at that. Just a few. And I can see where they're all coming from. They're coming from that main stem there, not these other stems or trunks. And I can see that if I were going to take cuttings from this tree, and I'm going to, trust me, I'm going to mark these. I'm going to take cuttings from these, okay, more successful branches, because the briba seem to be a little more winter hardy on these branches than the rest of the tree. And there's a lot of the rest of the tree. And you can see it yourself. Not only that, look how productive those branches are. And they lost some. I can see where they've lost briba. Some briba didn't mature. But more matured on a few branches on this tree, look, than the rest. And so when I'm going to take cuttings, I'm going to take cuttings from them. And I'm going to start some new trees. Okay? And here we are back to this tree that is really capitulating or surrendering to the root knot nematode. Finally, the nematodes have prevailed. And at my expense. So I'll do what I have to do. And I'll remove this tree, and that will be the end of that. Fortunately, I've started other Celeste trees, and so I have them in the yard, I have them home in my other property, and I've got an abundance of trees in this vicinity that I can also go and pick as many Celeste figs as I like during the harvest. But I've got other trees coming up. Here's one. And this one's being attacked by deer on this side, but it's still producing fruit. And in a few years, it will produce a great deal of fruit. I'm going to see if I can't get something around there, a wire cage to protect it from the deer. I want to just go back to the fertilizing, my method of fertilizing after the figs have set. This is J.H. Adriatic. It's a more abundant producer of figs than my Valle San Juan, or Valle San Giovanni is the way it should be properly pronounced, fig tree. They're not as tasty as my Valli San Giovanni, but almost. And it's a great, it's a good Adriatic, and I definitely would recommend it very strongly because it's an early producer and mine is not. You've got to be patient with mine. It takes several years before it really starts to pump out the figs. Once it does, though, look out. It produces, and it produces more briba, really a good crop of briba, which I love them, and they're tasty. They're delicious. It's a valuable fig to me because of sentimental reasons too. But if you're looking for a quick, good, all around really, really good and tasty and quick developing, quick producer, maturation wise, Adriatic type, I highly recommend the J. I've grown a lot of them, believe me. The Strawberry Verte, all kinds of them, you know, Battaglia Green. I mean, I could go through a list of them over the years. But I like JH Adriatic, and I would recommend it. I certainly like my San Giovanni, and I will distribute it in the future to the greater fig community because it's certainly worthwhile. It's a very different. It's very unique Adriatic. Trust me, it's as far as a variant, it's about as different as they come. It's different, but it is absolutely an Adriatic, and I've told the story about it before. Okay, this is the time to fertilize. The fruit is set, and so today I'm going to be fertilizing all my fig trees, and I'm going to cut this one down. Whew. I cut quite a few trees down last year when Debbie was asking me to do so. I made some videos and I cooperated, and so here's another one going to come down this year. And after the fruit, after the harvest, even this side, I'm taking it out. So it'll be gone, completely gone. Right there is a very old tree that it's brown turkey, but it's actually different than that. But I keep cutting it back. I don't want to grow it right now, but it's pretty nematode resistant. If I let it go, it would grow right back. Okay. Now it's time for me to get back to work. I've got a little more grafting to do, a little bit more yard work, and I've got some fertilizing to do. So I have to be responsible and say goodbye to you for now. Thank you for visiting. I always enjoy your visits. I hope you picked up a pointer or two. Good day. Hey! Come on out and join us, Deb. See you now.